YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to do a valve cover gasket repair. These leaks occur in Subarus. Typically the Hawkeye versions have a lot of these issues for some reason. So the Hawkeye Subarus are those made between like 2000 and 2009, 2007 I believe, somewhere in there. This is a 2005 Subaru Legacy. The valve cover gasket itself actually has a hole in it, but this will be the same procedure. We're going to put on a new valve cover gasket. We're going to put on a new valve cover. In most cases, you just keep the old valve cover and put on new gaskets. But let's just dive on in here and show you exactly what you need to do this job. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but let's dive on in. Okay, so for this project, the valve cover itself is going to have two giant holes for your spark plugs to go in, but it only has 5 holes for bolts. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Since I'm actually replacing mine, I'm going to have to take off the oil fill cap as well. But all you're going to need for this, if you already are just replacing the gasket, is you're just going to need like a 3/8 inch ratchet or a 1/2 inch ratchet or 1/4 inch ratchet, some type of ratchet, and then you're going to need a 10 millimeter head for these 5 bolts. Sometimes it's hard to get in there, so I actually use a 10 millimeter wrench as well. You're going to need the gasket. There's a couple things you're going to need here that typically come in a kit, or at least things I recommend. One is just this gasket. It's pre-formed, so you can see there's like little kind of ridges and changes in the gasket itself. You're going to need 2 spark plug gaskets. These, for some reason, tear all the time, so I have leaks in my 05 all the time. I buy genuine Subaru parts, I buy aftermarket parts, it doesn't seem to matter. But if you look at these, you'll see like a slight little crack in them occasionally, and that's just from, I guess just wear and tear, heating, whatever, but that will cause your spark plugs to leak, that will cause your car to misfire. That's another common problem in these Subarus. And then you have all these little metal pieces, so it's metal on one side, and then it's rubber kind of baked into the other side. There's 5 of these. These go over all the holes our 10 millimeter bolts are going to go into. And then one thing that I've never done, but I read online that I've been doing it wrong according to Subaru's manual, is you need gasket maker, so liquid gasket maker, right, to go onto the gasket itself when it goes into the valve cover. I think this is absurd. I don't think this makes any sense, but somebody pointed out online that Subaru's actual recommendations is these are supposed to be installed with gasket maker on top of the gasket. So we're gonna give this a shot and see how it works. But anyways, let's just dive on into the work here. We're just gonna take off these 5 bolts, take these off, and then we're gonna basically just take the other piece off. But if you were to do this, just strip off these little metal kind of washers here. You're just going to pop all these off, and then we're just going to take out the old one, clean this if you need to, put the new gasket in with some gasket maker, and then just bolt it on. It should be that simple. Alright, so I know this is not the easiest to see, but down in here, this is the valve cover itself. This is the corner bolt. This is the top piece here where the oil fill goes in, and then these are the spark plugs. There is a tab here on the back of the spark plug. You just put a finger on each side of this, grab it, hold, and then pull it, and it'll come right out. So let's see if we can get this shot. All right, spark plug's out. They're long rubber, at least the top piece. Pull the first one. All right, so now you can't see this. We're gonna pull the second spark plug the same way as the first one. Okay. All right, and then the spark plugs themselves are kind of in the way. So there's a little clip down here that holds the cables on. We're just gonna unhook that and just pull these out of the way for now. So I guess we do need a screwdriver on top of the other tools I mentioned. You just kind of squeeze it in here without breaking it. These things are pretty fragile. Okay, just pop it off. Then pull out one wire, set it aside. Unhook the second wire and put it to the other side here. All right, and now you can see the hole here where the spark plug goes. You can see the bolt on the top left. If you look carefully down there towards the right side of the screen in the middle here, there's another bolt, which is the middle bolt. That's the other top bolt right there, and then we'll just blindly kind of reach in there and feel around to undo the other 5. All right, so here's the first bolt, and as you can see, the washer came off with it, the one with the rubber on one side. Now we're gonna take off the other 4. So the next one is way down inside here. So just reach further down from where you were. It's a little tight, so if you have a shorter wrench, it might be a little more helpful than having a full-size, kind of standard 3/8" ratchet. All right, I just loosened it enough. I'm gonna undo it by hand. Okay, there's the second bolt. This one has the washer on it. Some of them might stick to the case, which is fine. You can just leave them until we pull the case out. All right, and next we're gonna get the middle bolt here. Again, if you see the 2 spark plug holes at the top, there's actually a tube as well that goes in the middle of the cover. So here's a new cover. I forgot we're gonna need pliers to take off this tube. But here's the 2 covers you should see. Right below this tube though in the car, you should see where we're gonna take this middle bolt off at. All right, so I'm running out of space, but I've got it loosened. I'm gonna use my hand to take it out the rest of the way. It's a little challenging with all these electrical and AC hoses, but you can do it if your arm's not too big. If not, you might just have to use a wrench. All right, bolt number 3 is out. Again, this one came off with its washer. Now we're just gonna move to the back here. Same as the front. You can see on the top here, there's going to be 1 bolt, and then on the bottom one's gonna be the worst to get out of all of these. But let's get down in here and see if we can get this bolt off. All right, so here's the top bolt. This is bolt number 4. So this is just challenging to get because there's not a lot of space and there's a bunch of AC lines and electrical here. But as you can see, if you can just barely get the wrench on, you can kind of move some of the electrical cables a little here and there, and then just see if we can get it loose a little bit. These shouldn't be that tight. So I hold the wrench with one hand and then use the other wrench to move the end of it just to get it out here. It's gonna be a little slow going, but it's worth it if you can get this out. Finally, we can get it loose enough. All right, bolt number 4 is out. All right, so there's no easy way for me to show you guys how to get to the bottom one. You're just gonna have to get your arm in here somehow, maybe use a wrench. But if you come through the back, there's more space than trying to come through the top or the front here. So my ratchet here won't fit, so I'm gonna have to use that little wrench. So grab yourself an open box wrench or whatever. I like to use the closed end. Just get down in here, and then actually, I'll show you this. So the wrench has a bend in it. I like to use the part that's bent forward to get around the box because the box sticks out and it's easier to use that direction. And again, this is gonna be slow going because you can only move a few degrees in here, but this is really the only way I've seen how to get this off. Oh, and also to note here, your car's gonna leak oil when you take this valve cover off. I can see it leaking right now on mine. That's okay though, because we're gonna refill it up a little bit. Also to note, since this is the last bolt, the cover is gonna be pressing outwards towards you. There's gonna be more pressure on the bolt. If you can press the cover, you might be able to actually undo that last one by hand when you get so far out. All right, so 5th bolt's out, super greasy. Something to note here is when you're pulling it by hand, it helps to scoot this washer as far back as possible, and then use your finger here. So use your finger here on the rim of the bolt to get a little better grip to unscrew it by hand. All right, and then the last step here is this whole cover is loose, but there's gonna be this clip down here. So You can see here, this is the two wings. You're just gonna squeeze that and pull. You can use pliers. I just use my hand because these are usually pretty easy to get off. But you reach in here, squeeze it, and then kind of pull. So this metal piece right there, that little metal piece is further up the line. And you can just grab this and just pull, and it should unhook. So the tube comes off. Kind of pull this line out of the way. Makes it a little easier that we just undid. And then I'm sliding this forward more and more. This AC line's in the way. Okay, so you're gonna have to jiggle it around and get it out right here. All right, this is the final case. If your case, you're gonna just pull this off. Yours is probably black, but I have a blue on here. You just strip this off, clean it out. All right, so now we've got the case out. Something else is that on the spark plugs here, you're gonna have these little rubber covers. They just pull off. And then pull this other one off. Oh, I dropped both of them. But we just pulled off these covers. This is what makes your spark plugs leak. So if you look at the engine and you have oil coming out of like where the spark plug goes in, it's because these are bad. I always replace these when I replace the valve cover, valve itself. It's just best to do it all at once. These tend to leak a lot in the Hawkeye Subarus as well. So in my case here, I'm gonna take off this tube and put it onto my new valve cover. If you are not replacing the cover because you don't have a hole in it, don't worry about it. All right, so you can see here, I actually have a crack in the case here, and it cuts over here. That's why I'm gonna replace mine. I'm gonna take off this, and then I'll show you how I'm gonna assemble this back together if you were gonna actually do this just as a replacement of the valve cover gasket. Okay, so before you put anything in, I'm gonna put the new one here. On yours, make sure you wipe out all the old oil. You do not want any oil on any of the metal before you put the gasket maker. So for this piece here, right, I'm gonna wipe this off real quick with a paper towel, nice clean one, so I get all the oil. It does have a little bit of like a, I don't know, plastic or rubber piece on here. I always like the smell of this gasket cleaner. It always smells like vinegar, or this gasket maker. So what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna apply a little bit to just the edge. And then I'm just gonna wipe it around with my finger. Maybe squeeze a little out onto my finger, might make it a little easier. I've had these leak occasionally, so I'm just gonna put a little bit of gasket maker on here. Again, I don't really care how clean a job this is, because this stuff's pretty easy to get off. I'm using high temp gasket maker as well, because a lot of these parts are just gonna get pretty hot. And then when I put this piece back on, gotta make sure it's facing the right direction. Put these two 10mm back in. Put this one back in. You can hear our resident cat flounder. She's just chilling on the car. She loves being in the cars. She loves working on the cars. She just hollers all the time, but that's okay. Okay, so we're gonna finish tightening this down. Use a ratchet and just tighten these on. Fairly snug, but we don't want to break this plastic. And don't be a lazy mechanic. Just clean off any extra that you've got kind of coming out of here. So this looks terrible. Just wipe it off. It'll make your life easier to make your car look better. And make sure the gasket doesn't fail. Okay, so now at this point, this would be what you would get if you just took it off and you stripped your gasket out. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Take a paper towel, take a rag, whatever, put it in between here, and make sure you clean all the oil out. You want all the oil out of these grooves, so when we put the gasket maker in, it sticks. When you put the rubber gasket in, it will seal correctly. All right, so if you look at this gasket, let's do this before we put the gasket maker on. It has a shape, and you can see there's a little divot, like little corner pieces. Those will go here at the top. So if you look, you can see there's a, so if you look here, you can see there's a big kind of bend here, a 90° over here. And then if we were to keep putting it in here, this bump goes up, but this one goes down, so it's the wrong way. Okay, so we flip the gasket 180, make sure it fits. So if you have a downward piece here, it matches the metal, matches the 90° corners. So this is gonna be the direction it goes on. You can see, we're gonna set this over here for now, just on the side. Okay, so now we need to put the gasket maker in. I was gonna just squeeze this into the holes, but it's gonna be messy and gross. I'm gonna actually apply this to the gasket itself and then just put the gasket in. And I'm just rubbing it on the back part that's gonna go into the bottom. Doesn't need to be perfect, try not to get it on everything. Don't worry about getting it on the sides of the gasket, it'll just help kind of seal it in a little better. Okay, now that I've got this all on here, I want to make sure I got it in the right direction. Okay, press it in. All right, and then one last step here, as I'm gonna do is add a little bit more gasket maker on here. Again, if you have stuff in here, wipe it off, don't leave it in there. You don't want it to get sucked into anything or to kind of hold anything up in the engine. So let's just do that real quick. I'll clean it, put the rest of it on, and then clean it, and we'll put it back on. Okay, so I'm gonna put a super light coat on. The reason being is that, as you remembered, it was a pain to get this out. It's gonna be a pain to get it back in, and I don't wanna get too much of this on the engine components inside the valve timing. All right, next we have new rings here that are gonna go on the spark plug covers. I am not going to put any gasket material on these. I don't think you need them. One thing you can do though to make this a little easier, which I'm gonna do here, is put a little bit of like motor oil on the inside of this ring. So when the rubber slides on the metal, there's less friction and there's a smaller chance of it tearing. So just a little bit of motor oil here in the cap. Rub it on the insides of the cap here. Do the other one. Again, you don't need a ton, just enough to kind of lubricate it. Set this to the side. All right, reach back in, put these on. No, this isn't the best view, but they really just kind of slide on. You're gonna need 2 hands. It should only slide on, I think, about like a 1/4 inch. And you can see inside the ring, if you look, there's like a little bit of a lip. That's as far as it's gonna go on. So now if you remember right, we brought the case, the valve cover through here. So I'm gonna try to move some of these just out of the way just a little bit. So when I slide it in, we don't get it too dirty. You're gonna be sliding it between the frame of the car and the engine. I'm not a big fan of doing this gasket maker, but that's what they specify. So we're gonna try to get this in here without getting too much on everything. All right, so kind of a warning here. I would put the gasket maker just on the inside of the case. If not, you get it everywhere. Sure, it'd be fine to do this if you had the entire engine out of the car, but I just don't like getting this stuff everywhere and it's kind of a mess. I'm gonna try to clean the engine block as well, but just as a warning, if you want to do it this way, go for it. I don't think you'll have any issues, but at the same time, I think it's cleaner and easier to do it without it. All right, so one thing to note is try to keep the valve cover as high as possible when sliding it back in, because you can make less of a mess. It'll slide in and get around the front timing cover, which I know you can't see. Then you can slide this oil cover out of the way, and then you can wiggle it around a little more. Hopefully slide it in. All right, so once you kind of got it jiggled back in here, we're just gonna apply the 5 bolts again. I'm gonna start with the middle bolt, or maybe one of the top bolts, because I think it'll be easier to get those started. Get most of the case down, and then get the final, like the bottom pane one in last. So take your old bolt, slide off the old kind of washer with the gasket here, slide the new one on, and then we can just put them back in. And something else to note here to make your job a little bit easier is out of the 5 bolts, you're gonna have 2 sizes, okay? This one is a little bit taller than this one. The taller ones are gonna go in the case on the top corners. So if you look at the case here, you can see this top piece is gonna need a longer bolt to go all the way through. Whereas if you tilt the case up and look at the bottom here, it's gonna be quite thin, okay? Also, the middle piece is sunken in for a reason, and also this is closer to the edge, but there's actually a piece of the middle of the valve itself, the valve assembly, that's gonna have a piece of metal sticking here. So there's only gonna be 2 long ones, and they're only gonna go here in the top corners, okay? All right, so I'm gonna do the top one first, so the long bolt with a new washer on it. And it's always easier to do this with a wrench than it is to do it by hand. All right, it's just starting to flatten the washer, the rubber piece. I'm not gonna tighten it any further than that. I'm gonna put all of them on so we can line them all up, get them halfway snug, and then I'll tighten down that bottom corner one that's a pain, and then do the rest. And this top one I can't use a wrench on, there's just not enough space, so I'm gonna do this one by hand. So I put a lot of these new bolts in. If you can't quite reach them, you might have to use a wrench instead because your socket won't fit when they're most of the way out. Something else to note is if you have a wrench with a ratcheting end, this will make this job a lot easier for a 10. I don't have one, so I do these by hand. And then finally, we're gonna put this last one in. It's a bear to get in here. You're just gonna have to reach all in and try to get it put in as best you can. And it's always best to come from the back, at least in my case. I feel like I have more space for my arm to go in through all these different lines. All right, and make sure you tighten this last one down all the way so you're done with it, and then you can go back and tighten the other ones. Okay, so now that all these are tightened on, I've made sure all 5 bolts are snug in place. It took me quite a while. We're gonna take this hose again, and we're gonna put it back on this part of the case, and again, I'm gonna pinch with my hands and slide this kind of wing back on. So first, slide the pipe on. Make sure it seats all the way down in the case, then go in, pinch the metal tabs, and slide the ring on. Pinch with 2 hands and use the other hand to slide it on. All right, now that's on. The last piece is the spark plugs. So now you take the line that's the furthest to the front. Okay, we snap this back into a few places, but first let's get this line back to where we can slide it in. All right, so we're gonna snap this in to the bottom here, that piece we took off with the screwdriver at the beginning. Being careful not to break it. There's also another one up here you can push it into. And then take your spark plug, put it into the hole. You might have to bend it a little bit, wiggle it in, and then push right in the center of it on the back. Okay, and you should feel a little bit of like a metal pop as the metal from the tube slides onto the top of the spark plug. Find your second spark plug. Again, weave it back through the right air conditioning hoses. Slide it back into these little clips here that just hold the cables out of the way. Use your finger and snap the door closed on the little piece of plastic that holds them. Take this one, angle it as best you can. You might have to bend it to get it into the hole like I did. Slide it in, and then really push on it on the back. So this one didn't make a metal snapping noise, I didn't feel it. But if you grab the tabs and pull a little bit, you can see if it's snug. And that one came out and it was. Now it's not. So we're gonna push it back in, pull a little bit, yeah, okay, that one's snapped in. All right, and if you've undone any of these kind of tabs here that hold on the pipes, make sure all that's snug, make sure you have no loose caps, and that's it, guys. That's how you change out the valve cover and the valve cover gasket, and also the spark plug gaskets as well. So anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you found this helpful, and as always, until next time.